Chosen one, the deceptive mask of a specific predator in your life has finally shattered beyond repair. You just knocked the smile off this snake's face. They thought they could misuse this info against you, but their calculated attempt to weaponize your secrets has backfired spectacularly. Somewhere, this person is sitting in a cold, suffocating silence, realizing that the very information they gathered to destroy you has become the instrument of their own exposure. Before we get to the war, you need to understand how the war started. There was a moment, maybe you remember it, maybe you do not, where someone looked at your life and felt something shift in their chest. Not admiration, not genuine joy for you, something colder and smaller than either of those things. It was the specific kind of envy that does not announce itself loudly but sits quiet in the dark and starts calculating. They looked at your energy, your presence, your natural momentum, the way things seem to move in your direction, the way people are drawn to you without you even trying, and they made a decision you did not know was being made about you. The decision was simple and cold. I am going to put an end to this. This was not a random villain. This was someone with access, someone who sat close enough to learn your patterns, your history, your soft spots, your vulnerable seasons. Someone who may have had your trust, or at least enough of it to get what they needed, because a wolf does not hunt from a distance. A wolf gets close first, and this particular wolf was patient. While appearing warm and present, they were doing something else entirely beneath the surface. They were collecting information on you, not casually, not by accident, deliberately. Every conversation was an opportunity to catalog something you had no idea was being catalogued. Every moment of vulnerability, every chapter of your life that carried any kind of complexity or mess, all of it got filed away, stored and shaped into something they believed they could use against you one day. And the entire time this was happening, they were smiling at you, warm, concerned, supportive, on your side. That is your villain. Keep that picture in mind as we move forward, because what they thought they were building was a weapon. What they were actually building was the nail in their own coffin, and they constructed it themselves and handed it to you without realizing any of it. They did not target you randomly. Something was shifting when you arrived. Something was lifting, and that shift was a direct, silent indictment of everything they were not. You were not trying to make them feel small. You were not performing or competing or positioning yourself against them in any deliberate way. You were just being yourself, naturally, effortlessly, and that alone was enough to feel like a threat to someone whose entire sense of worth depended on being the most significant person in the space. Your presence was the provocation, not anything you said, not anything you did. Simply the undeniable reality of who you are was enough to make someone decide you needed to be dismantled. Let that land for a moment. You were targeted for your light, and you are still here, still lit, so they made their move, and the move itself reveals exactly who they are. They did not come out swinging in the open. That is not how this kind of person operates. They went sideways and quiet. They took the information they had gathered and brought it to someone else first, someone already carrying a little suspicion about you, someone already feeling small in your presence, someone whose small-minded certainty made them easy to load and aim. If that person moved against you, the snake would get the result without the fingerprints. The dirty work would be done by someone else while the snake stayed clean. And here is the detail that is almost too calculated to fully absorb. They wrapped the whole delivery in care. They did not say they were trying to harm you. They said they were looking out for someone. They positioned themselves as the honest, brave, concerned party who just had to say something because they care so deeply. They made a calculated act of destruction sound like an act of love, and the person receiving it believed every syllable. They took the whole thing without asking a single question about what had been deliberately left out. Now here is where it escalates, because this was never about one person hearing the information. The snake got greedy. They took it to more people, different rooms, different circles, and with every new telling the story shifted slightly, a little more dramatic here, a little more damning there, a little more convenient with each new audience. What was actually a fragment of your life, stripped of all context, was being presented as the complete picture of who you are. What the snake actually did with the information is something you need to understand clearly. They did not necessarily fabricate everything from nothing. The specific fraud was context removal. They took a real moment, a real struggle, a real chapter that had some mess in it, and they amputated everything surrounding it. They cut the explanation, they cut what led to it, what you learned from it, how you handled it, and how you came through it. They handed someone a wound and called it a character study. They offered a fragment and presented it as a complete portrait, and the people receiving it never once asked for the rest of the story. This is precisely why the whole thing is backfiring right now. The full story still exists. You are still here, and the person the snake described using that stripped-down fragment is not the person anyone who has genuinely been around you recognizes. The gap between the constructed version and the real version is too wide to bridge. The questions now being asked are questions the snake cannot answer cleanly. Every answer that does not land pulls another brick from the foundation they built everything on. You were feeling all of this before you could fully name it. The strange silence from someone who used to be warm, the shifted energy when you walked into certain rooms, the opportunity that quietly stopped being an opportunity, the relationship that developed a coldness with no visible reason. You were feeling the edges of a war you did not know had been formally declared, and you survived every single hit of it, not because you were lucky, but because you were built to withstand what ordinary people cannot. If this message awakens something within you, hype this video for other chosen ones who need to hear this. Watching you refuse to fall made the snake desperate, and desperate people do what desperate people always do. They escalate. More people got brought in, more rooms got whispered in, the operation grew. Some of the people recruited had their own quiet reasons to participate, their own small grievances, their own envy that the snake identified and pressed like a button. These people did not need much convincing. They were already primed. All they needed was permission and a cover story, and the snake provided both without hesitation. What you need to understand about how this sabotage actually operated is that it was not all loud and confrontational. Most of it was quiet. Some of the people working against you were not making dramatic moves. They were making small ones, not mentioning your name in a room where it should have been mentioned, not correcting a false impression when they had the opportunity to do so, withholding an introduction, letting a silence sit where a word of support should have been spoken. These were small acts of omission, one stacked on top of another, directed by someone running a coordinated play. You were feeling the accumulated weight of all those quiet omissions as a pressure you could not quite pin down or name. The snake's entire approach was built around maintaining distance from the damage. Their goal was clean hands. They wanted to be able to look directly at you and say they had done nothing, technically true on the surface, while a full operation they designed was running against your name, your opportunities, and your peace in the background. They wanted to be present at the impact and completely absent from the blame. The ambition behind all of this was never just your embarrassment, it was your momentum. Something real was coming for you, an opportunity, a level, an emergence they could see building in your direction, and they needed it stopped. They needed the right people to have a bad taste in their mouth when your name came up in the rooms that mattered. The goal was total destabilization. They wanted you so overwhelmed across so many areas at once that your only remaining option would be to walk away from everything you had already built and leave it behind. They almost pulled it off. Almost. You were still going. Not with dramatic declarations or public statements or carefully worded responses. You were just still going, waking up, moving forward, continuing to invest in the things that belonged to you, showing up for the people who deserved your presence, continuing to build the exact thing they were trying to starve out. And every single ordinary, unglamorous, nobody is watching day that you kept moving, you were dismantling their entire operation without even knowing it. Here is the truth about the kind of pressure they were applying. It only works if you crack. The whole architecture of their strategy was built on one assumption, that eventually the weight would become too much, that eventually the setbacks would stack high enough, the isolation would close in tight enough, the self-doubt would get loud enough, and you would fold, you would walk away, and you did not. That refusal, that quiet, stubborn, unspectacular refusal to abandon your position, was more powerful than any confrontation you could have staged. Every day you stayed put was another day. Their operation burned through its own fuel with nothing to show for it. Every day you kept building was another day. The thing they were trying to intercept kept moving in the direction it was always meant to go. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. It's easy to watch videos about chosen ones. It's another thing to put yourself to the test. If you're still here, that means something. But talk is cheap. Real chosen ones take action. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve divine justice. You put on the headphones, press play, and watch your enemies choke on the rope their own lies created. If you're done consuming and ready to prove you're chosen, start your Destiny Engine for $1 today. Join the Obsidian Inner Order live checks and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. You may have been telling yourself that you were only just surviving that season, that holding on was weakness dressed up as perseverance. No, holding on was the power move. The decisive moment in this story was never going to be a dramatic showdown. It was always going to be you, still standing, when the structure they built around you collapsed from the inside, and that is exactly what happened. Every day you did not walk away was another day. The operation had to keep running. Running takes fuel. Fuel means more conversations, more people, more coordination, more maintenance of a story that was already showing signs of instability. Every day you stayed put, forced them to stay in position too, and staying in position exposed them. The longer they had to keep the operation going to finally break you, the more visible the whole architecture became to the people surrounding it. Your persistence did not just protect you. It illuminated every single person involved in coming against you, one by one, until the entire operation was impossible for anyone paying real attention to ignore. The snake strategy had a structural weakness that no amount of careful planning could eliminate, because the weakness is built into the very nature of what they were doing. Lies require maintenance. Every person who hears a constructed story becomes a variable. Every variable introduces the possibility of a question being asked that the snake cannot answer cleanly. Every room that gets whispered in is another room where two versions of the story might eventually get compared side by side. And when enough people across enough spaces are involved, the maintenance becomes impossible to sustain. The cracks started showing quietly, a raised eyebrow during a conversation, a hesitation that lasted just a beat too long. Someone comparing accounts with someone else and noticing that the two versions did not fully align. Someone who had acted on the information starting to see you operate up close, encountering the real version of you and feeling the jarring gap between what they had been told and what they were now witnessing firsthand. That gap does not stay internal, it turns into a question, and once one question gets asked out loud, the next question arrives faster. Something in the information the snake used against you is provably visibly wrong, not subtly off, not open to interpretation. It is the kind of wrong that when someone examines it directly, produces that specific expression that means the math simply does not add up. People are examining it, the questions are being asked, and every question that cannot be answered with confidence removes another brick from the wall they built. The wall does not need to fall all at once, it only needs to become obviously unstable, and right now it is. You do not have to prove anything, you never did. The contradiction was always living inside the lie, waiting for enough light to make it visible. Your only role was to keep being who you are long enough for the people paying real attention to make the comparison on their own. You have been doing exactly that. The comparison is being made, and the result is not what the snake needed it to be. You are allowed to feel the satisfaction of this moment without guilt. You did not wish ill on anyone. You did not plot a counterattack or orchestrate a takedown. You simply refused to disappear. And watching the truth surface on its own, watching the cracks appear in the wall that was built around your name without you having to touch a single brick, is not gloating. It is the vindication of every quiet, difficult, thankless day you spent choosing integrity when deception would have been easier. It is the confirmation that you read the situation correctly all along, that what you felt in your gut about what was happening was real, that your discernment was not paranoia, that you were not imagining the weight of what was being orchestrated. You were right. And right now, in real time, the evidence is catching up to what you already knew. The snake is trapped, not in a vague or poetic sense, specifically and concretely trapped, with both exits closed. Confessing is not an option. Too many people heard the story delivered with too much conviction, and walking it back now means publicly dismantling the entire identity they built on top of it. But continuing forward is not an option either, because the story is already visibly and publicly coming apart. The questions are on the table, the contradictions are being examined side by side. There is no play left, no move, no exit. The door is locked, and they locked it themselves. The people they recruited are now waking up to what they were actually recruited for. The specific humiliation of realizing you were used as a weapon against someone who did not deserve it is not something people absorb quietly. That humiliation has to go somewhere, and it does not land on you. It goes directly toward the person who handed them the false information, pointed them at a target, and then stepped back to keep their own hands clean. The fury of someone who realizes they were manipulated is precise and purposeful, and right now that fury is aimed directly at the one who set the whole thing in motion. When the people who carried the story start talking, not to defend you, but to distance themselves from the collapse, what comes out is not about you. It is about who brought them what they were told, and what they now understand about the person who told them. Your name is being cleared inside the very conversations that were originally designed to damage it. That is the specific, undeniable irony of this moment. The operation is becoming the instrument of its own exposure. The smile is gone. What replaced it is the look of someone who bet everything on a scheme and just watched it detonate in their own hands. The people who gave this person credibility, who let them into trusted spaces based on the image they carefully maintained, are now looking at the reality underneath that image. And what they are finding is not what was advertised. It never was. That is your victory. Not something you manufactured, something that arrived because lies always expire, and your truth was never a lie to begin with. And I want you to sit in this moment with the full weight of what it means, because you earned the right to feel this, not with gloating, with the deep, settled exhale of someone who held their ground through something that was designed to bury them. You did not get here by accident. You got here because every time the pressure mounted and the logical response was to give up, you chose differently. You chose to stay. You chose to keep building. You chose to remain exactly who you are, instead of collapsing into the smaller version of yourself that the snake needed you to become in order for the plan to work. That choice, made quietly, made repeatedly, made on days when nobody was watching and there was no applause for making it, is the reason you are on the receiving end of this reversal instead of the delivering end of it. You did not just survive this, you outlasted it. And outlasting something that was built to break you is not a small thing, it is everything. There is something categorically different about being exposed as someone who deliberately misused information versus being caught in a standard lie. A standard lie can often be rationalized. It can be explained away with the defense of misunderstanding or imperfect memory. but deliberately taking information about someone, information that was personal, private, or contextual, stripping it down, reshaping it, and deploying it as a weapon to destroy that person's name, relationships, and access. That registers in a completely different category in the minds of people who witness it. That kind of behavior does not get forgiven the way ordinary mistakes do. It gets filed away permanently. The people who now understand what was done, who can see clearly that the information was engineered as a tool of destruction rather than shared from any honest place, are placing the snake in that permanent category right now. They are not debating it. They are not offering the benefit of the doubt. The intent is too visible. The pattern is too clear once the fog of the constructed narrative lifts. And once someone lands in that category, in the minds of people who matter, the recovery is nearly impossible. Doors do not reopen. Trust does not reset. The welcome in certain rooms does not return. Your name, on the other hand, is moving in the opposite direction through those same rooms. The weight on it is lifting. The distortion that was placed over the way people were seeing you is clearing. And what people are seeing as it clears is simply who you have always been, the real version, the full version, the version the snake was so desperate to bury that they ran an entire operation trying to prevent it from being what people encountered. Their effort to hide the real you ended up drawing direct attention toward it. You did not have to do a single thing to create this reversal. Your job was to remain who you are. You did that every single day through the entire season of pressure. And now everything that was sent in your direction is heading directly back to the source. The conversations that were happening about you in the wrong direction are now shifting. People who held a version of you in their minds that was built from the snake's narrative are being given a new version, not because you handed it to them, but because reality keeps refusing to match the story. Your actual track record, your actual character, your actual presence in the lives of people who know you genuinely, all of it is becoming impossible to dismiss or override with a second-hand account. The rooms that were cold are warming. The people who had quietly distanced themselves are quietly coming back, not always with grand gestures or formal apologies, sometimes just with a softened tone, a returned message, a door reopening as if it had never closed. You will notice it. You are probably already noticing it. And every one of those subtle shifts is the universe correcting the record that the snake tried to write about you. One interaction, one room, one mind at a time. What is happening right now has a signature on it that no amount of human scheming could have produced on its own. When someone moves against a chosen one, not just any person, but someone who is genuinely set apart and carrying something that extends beyond their personal ambitions, they do not simply move against that person, they move against the force that is on that person's life. And that force does not negotiate. It does not get confused by manufactured paperwork or coordinated whisper campaigns. It simply moves quietly, consistently, without needing to announce itself. Every door that was closed in front of you, you found another one. Every seed of setback planted in your path, the ground rejected it. Every lie told about you was accumulating a debt, and that debt was not being charged to your account. It was accumulating in the name of the one who told it, not a debt that produces returns, a debt that costs. It grew with every passing day, and by the time the bill came due, the amount owed was more than they had any capacity to pay. You were never as alone in this as it felt. There was something working in the background through every season of that pressure, preserving what needed to be preserved, rerouting what needed to be rerouted, quietly dismantling what had been assembled against you while you were simply focused on making it through the day. That is not coincidence. That is not luck. That is the signature of a protection over your life that a snake with an agenda has no authority to override. The vindication coming your way is not the kind you had to campaign for. You do not need to draft a statement, or make a call, or position yourself in front of anyone who was used against you. The case has already been filed. The verdict was already written. Your only requirement was to still be standing when it was delivered, and you are standing, right now, still standing. Think about the moments where something should have gone permanently, irreversibly wrong, and it did not. Think about the door that closed, and then a better one appeared from a direction you were not even looking. Think about the relationship that cracked under the pressure of what was being said about you, and how the cracking revealed exactly who in your life was actually built to hold. Think about the opportunity that seemed to disappear and then resurfaced in a form that was far more aligned with where you were actually going. None of those redirections were random. Every single one of them was the protection on your life, doing exactly what it was always designed to do, refusing to let what belongs to you be permanently reassigned by someone who had no rightful claim to it. You were being guided through the war the entire time. The path looked different than expected because the protection was rerouting you around landmines they had already set. You were never walking blindly. You were being walked through. They could not stop. Even as the operation started showing cracks, even as the returns diminished, even as warning signs were clearly present, they kept going. And the reason is this: they had staked their entire constructed identity on the outcome. This was not a casual scheme they could quietly walk away from when things got complicated. The story about you was the source of their status in certain rooms. The information was their currency. Being the person who knew what was really going on with you was giving them something they could not produce through any legitimate means. When someone misuses information about another person, they are not only trying to cause harm, they are harvesting something for themselves: attention, positioning, access, social capital, sometimes material benefit, sometimes just the intoxicating feeling of being the most knowing and most powerful presence in a room. They needed what the information was giving them. It was feeding something in them that could not be fed honestly, which is why they kept going past the point of reason, past the point of safety, past every moment where a rational calculation should have made them stop. They were addicted to what the harvest was producing. That addiction is precisely what trapped them, because every addiction demands escalation to sustain the same effect. The story had to keep growing, the distribution had to keep widening, more details had to be layered in to keep the original version convincing, until the operation became so large and so structurally compromised that one sincere direct question from one person paying real attention was enough to begin the entire collapse. The material benefit they were extracting, financially, professionally, or in terms of access and resources, is now being stripped away alongside the reputation. Not just the loss of image, but the actual doors that opened, because they were perceived as credible, as the insider, as the person with the real story. Those doors are closing. The value they extracted from misusing your information is being reclaimed, and that reclamation is not general bad luck. It is the exact thing being taken back in the exact proportion it was wrongfully taken. That is why the fear you are sensing from that direction carries a particular, unmistakable quality. It is not the general anxiety of someone who has simply been caught. It is the specific terror of watching your material footing and your constructed identity dissolve at the same time, with no persona left to retreat behind and no way to explain either loss without exposing everything. The real target was your emergence, the specific energy of someone who is growing into themselves, shedding what no longer belongs, discovering the full scope of what they carry. Someone who is becoming uncontainable. That was the thing they could not tolerate. Not what you had in the present moment, what you were becoming, because what you were becoming was going to make their smallness permanently visible by contrast. And for someone whose entire identity depends on being seen as significant, your growth represented an existential threat. They wanted to interrupt the emergence. They wanted to make the process of you becoming your full self so costly, so turbulent, so exhausting from every direction that you would choose the smaller version of your life just to make the pressure stop. That was the transaction they were silently offering. Stay small, stay manageable, stay in the version of yourself that does not force them to confront what they are not, and in exchange the attacks would stop. You did not take that deal. And that refusal is the single most important thing you have ever done, because the version of you that came through this pressure and kept growing is not the same person who walked into it. What came through is refined, compressed into something harder, clearer, and more certain of itself than anything comfortable seasons could have produced. They tried to use this chapter to diminish you. Instead, it clarified you. The operation is dismantling from the inside. The people who were used are turning. The information that was weaponized is backfiring with more thoroughness and more permanence than any external exposure could have achieved. The glamour is stripped. The constructed image is gone. The gains built on top of your name are being dissolved. And the era that person thought they were constructing on the wreckage of what they tried to do to you, it is finished. Hear this with no softening. What was done to you was cold-blooded and deliberate. It was designed to end you, not slow you down, end you. The goal was to corner you until your only remaining move was to abandon everything you had invested in and leave it behind for someone else to claim, and it did not work. That is not luck. That is not the result of them not being committed enough. They were extremely committed. They recruited. They sustained the operation with patience and discipline. They were genuinely dedicated to your downfall, and it still did not happen, which means the thing standing between their scheme and its intended destination was never luck. It was you, the specific, irreplaceable, undestroyable version of you that was equipped for exactly this before you ever walked into the season. The revelation this whole story was building toward is not that they were evil. You already knew that. It is not that justice was coming. You could already feel that. The revelation is that it did not work on you, and that single fact is the proof of what you carry. Other people fold under this kind of pressure. Other people walk away, shrink, accept the smaller life just to make the attack stop. You did not. That is not a small thing. That is the evidence of your designation. So here is your assignment moving forward. Your assignment is not to look backward and catalogue what they did. Your assignment is not to wait for a public moment of vindication before you allow yourself to move. Your assignment is to walk into the next thing with the full authority of someone who just survived a direct assault on their destiny and came through with that destiny not only intact but accelerated. The pressure did not delay what belongs to you. It deepened the roots that will hold everything that is coming. And deep roots mean that when the full bloom arrives, nothing, not one scheme, not one snake, not one misused fragment of your story can knock it back down. They built a weapon out of your information. You turned it into your origin story. They thought they held the narrative. You became the only narrative that matters. The smile is off their face. The authority is in your hands. The era they constructed on top of your name is over, and the era that belongs to you, it is not coming. It is here. Stand up, shoulders back, eyes forward, not with arrogance, with authority. The authority of someone who was built for this, who survived everything that was designed to prevent it, and who is now standing exactly where they were always meant to stand. They thought they could use information to end you. What they actually did was hand you the clearest possible proof of what you are made of, and the world is about to watch you write every word of what comes